Mother Bear was hanging from the bridge. What this human baby did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun filtered through the ancient trees of Willow Creek Valley, casting dappled shadows across the worn wooden bridge that connected the two sides of the small village of Pine Haven. The bridge creaked and swayed gently in the breeze, its weathered planks testament to decades of faithful service spanning the rushing waters below. Spring had arrived early this year, and the riverbanks bloomed with wildflowers in vibrant shades of purple and yellow. Lily Morgan sat on a checkered blanket near the riverbank, her eyes occasionally drifting to her 14-month-old daughter, Emma. The baby girl giggled as she plucked at dandelions and watched their fluffy seeds dance away on the wind. Lily's husband, Jacob, fell asleep that night with unanswered questions swirling in his mind, yet somehow at peace with the extraordinary circumstances his family had found themselves in. He woke to soft golden light streaming through the cabin windows and the sound of quiet laughter, Emma's unmistakable giggle. For a moment, he forgot where they were. Then he turned to see an empty space beside him where Emma should have been. Panic surged through him until his eyes focused on the scene across the room. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor beside the mother bear, who was now resting in a more comfortable position. The bandages around her neck and shoulder were clean and white, showing no signs of the seeping blood from yesterday. Most remarkably, the bear was awake and alert, her eyes clear of the pain-glazed look they had held for days. The cub was playfully batting at a small rubber ball that Emma rolled back and forth, while the mother bear watched with what could only be described as contentment. "She's doing much better this morning," came Dr. Blackwood's quiet voice from the doorway. "Her fever broke around dawn, and the infection appears to be responding to the antibiotics. I've never seen such a rapid recovery in a wild animal." Lily had awakened beside Jacob and was taking in the scene with wonder. "How long has Emma been up?" "About an hour," the scientist replied. "One of my assistants heard her stirring and checked on her. By the time I arrived, she was already sitting with the bears, talking to them in that special language children have." The mother bear's vital signs improved almost immediately upon their interaction. Jacob and Lily exchanged glances, a mixture of amazement and lingering concern in their eyes. As if sensing their thoughts, Emma looked up and beamed at them. "Bear Mama better," she announced proudly. "No more OE." Hannah entered the cabin then, carrying a medical kit. She froze momentarily at the domestic scene before her, a toddler and two wild bears interacting like lifelong companions, before her professional demeanor reasserted itself. "I need to check her wounds," she said, approaching cautiously. "Emma, can you ask your friend to stay still for me?" It was a light-hearted request, not meant to be taken literally. But to everyone's astonishment, Emma placed her tiny hand on the mother bear's muzzle and said clearly, "Doctor, help. Stay still." The bear's eyes moved from Emma to Hannah, then back to Emma. Then, deliberately, she extended her injured leg and neck, providing easier access to the bandaged areas. Hannah's hands trembled slightly as she began unwrapping the bandages. "This is unbelievable," she murmured. "She's positioning herself to help me examine her." What they saw beneath the bandages drew gasps from everyone in the room. The deep gashes that had been raw and inflamed just yesterday were now significantly healed, far beyond what should have been possible in a single night. "This defies medical explanation," Hannah said, carefully probing the healing tissue. "These wounds were life-threatening yesterday. Today, they look weeks into the healing process." Dr. Blackwood was documenting everything with a small, handheld camera, her scientific mind clearly racing to process what she was witnessing. There are cases in medical literature of accelerated healing in humans due to psychological factors, the will to live, essentially, but nothing like this in wildlife medicine. The mother bear remained perfectly still throughout the examination, her eyes never leaving Emma, who chatted to her in a mixture of real words and toddler babble. The cub had abandoned its ball and was now curled against Emma's side, occasionally making soft grunting sounds that the child seemed to understand perfectly. "What happens now?" Jacob asked quietly. "She's healing, but she's still a wild animal. Eventually, ... He didn't need to finish the thought. Eventually, the bears would need to return to the forest. They belonged in the wild, not in human company, no matter how extraordinary the connection they had formed with Emma. As if understanding the unspoken concern, the mother bear made a low, rumbling sound and gently nudged her cub. The young bear looked up at its mother, then at Emma, then back at its mother. After a moment, it rose and padded over to the cabin door, looking back expectantly. "I think," Dr. Blackwood said slowly, "she's telling us something." Emma stood up, reaching for her father's hand. "Walk," she said simply. "Bear show?" Nathan, who had entered the cabin during the examination, looked startled. "You think she wants to take us somewhere?" The mother bear rose to her feet with surprising steadiness, considering her recent condition. She moved to the door where her cub waited, then turned to look at the humans, particularly Emma. "I'll get your coat," Lily said automatically, mother's instinct taking over despite the bizarre circumstances. Within minutes, they were following the bears along a narrow forest path. The mother moved with increasing confidence, her strength visibly returning with each step. The cub bounded ahead, then back, occasionally touching noses with Emma, who walked between her parents holding their hands. Dr. Blackwood, Hannah, and Nathan followed at a respectful distance, along with Connor Adams, who had arrived at the cabin just as they were leaving. None of them spoke, aware they were witnessing something beyond ordinary explanation. The forest grew denser as they walked, the morning sunlight filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns. Birds called overhead, and once a deer bounded across their path, pausing briefly to regard the strange procession before disappearing into the underbrush. After about 20 minutes of walking, they came to a small clearing. In its center stood an ancient oak tree, its massive trunk split near the bottom to form a natural hollow large enough for the mother bear to enter. Near the tree was a small stream, clear water bubbling over smooth stones. The bears stopped at the edge of the clearing. The mother bear turned to look at Emma, then at the tree hollow. The message was unmistakable. This was their home. Emma's face fell as understanding dawned in her innocent mind. "Bear home?" she asked, her voice small. The mother bear approached her slowly, lowering her massive head to the child's eye level. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them that none of the adults could interpret. Then, with infinite gentleness, the bear touched her nose to Emma's forehead, a gesture so deliberate, so tender, that several of the watching adults felt tears spring to their eyes. The cub bounded over, rubbing against Emma's legs one last time before scampering back to its mother's side. The two bears stood together at the edge of the clearing, a perfect picture of wild dignity and surprising intelligence. "They're saying goodbye," Hannah whispered, wiping away a tear. "They know they belong here, not with us." Emma looked up at her parents, her eyes bright with unshed tears, but also with a wisdom beyond her years. "Bear go home," she said simply. "Emma go home too." Jacob knelt beside his daughter, his heart breaking for her even as he marveled at her understanding. Yes, sweetheart. Just like we have our home, they have theirs. But we can visit sometimes from a safe distance. Would you like that? Emma nodded solemnly, then turned back to the bears. With a courage that left the adults breathless, she took 3 steps forward, stopped, and raised her tiny hand in farewell. Bye-bye, bear friends. The mother bear raised her paw slightly, as if returning the gesture. Then, with a final look at the assembled humans, she turned and led her cub toward the ancient oak. At the entrance to their den, she paused once more, looking back at Emma. The morning sunlight caught her fur, turning it to burnished gold, creating an image none of them would ever forget. Wild majesty, acknowledging human compassion. Then the bears disappeared into their den, leaving the humans standing in awed silence. Dr. Blackwood was the first to speak. In 30 years of wildlife research, I've never witnessed anything like what we've seen these past days. There are no scientific terms adequate to describe it. Perhaps some things aren't meant to be explained by science, Elijah Thompson said quietly. No one had noticed the old man join them, yet somehow his presence felt natural, as if he had always been part of this story. What we've witnessed here is something ancient, he continued, his weathered hand coming to rest gently on Emma's shoulder. Something that existed before humans built walls between themselves and the wild world. This child has reminded us of what we've forgotten, that all living creatures share a connection, if only we're innocent enough to see it. In the months that followed, the story of Emma and the bears spread far beyond Pine Haven. Dr. Blackwood's research paper, published in the most prestigious wildlife journal, sparked intense debate in scientific circles. Nathan's photographs won international awards. Wildlife protection laws in the region were strengthened, with George Parker, of all people, leading the local initiative. The bridge was rebuilt, stronger than before, with a special observation platform where visitors could safely watch for wildlife. Tourism brought new prosperity to the village, though the council worked diligently to balance economic opportunity with preservation of their natural surroundings. Sarah Chen's documentary, The Bear Child of Pine Haven, earned critical acclaim for its sensitive portrayal of the events, focusing on the environmental message rather than sensationalizing Emma's role. By mutual agreement, her parents limited media exposure of their daughter, protecting her from becoming a spectacle while still allowing her story to inspire others. Emma grew, as children do, but never lost her special affinity for animals. Twice a year, on the first day of spring and the first day of autumn, her parents would take her to the edge of the clearing with the ancient oak tree. They would wait quietly, never approaching too close, respecting the boundary between the human and wild worlds. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, a mother bear would appear at the edge of the trees, a half-grown cub at her side. They would stand for a few moments watching the human child who had once saved them, before melting back into the forest that was their home. On Emma's 5th birthday, she received a package from Dr. Blackwood, who had become a family friend. Inside was a beautifully bound children's book titled The Girl Who Spoke to Bears. The illustrations, based on Nathan's photographs, captured the magic of those extraordinary days. But it was the inscription that brought tears to Lily's eyes as she read it aloud to her daughter. To Emma, who taught us all that the greatest power in the world is not dominion over nature, but communion with it. May you never lose your ability to see with your heart what others can only glimpse with their eyes. That night, as Lily tucked Emma into bed, her daughter asked the question she had been pondering all day. "Mommy, did I really talk to the bears?" Lily sat on the edge of the bed, considering how to answer. Outside the window, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. In the distance, the silhouette of the forest stood against the horizon, mysterious and eternal. "What do you think, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Emma was quiet for a long moment, her young face thoughtful in the soft light of her bedside lamp. "I think," she said finally, "that sometimes when you love something very much, it doesn't matter if you speak the same language. Your hearts understand each other anyway." Lily leaned down to kiss her daughter's forehead, exactly where the mother bear had touched her nose that day in the clearing. "I think you're exactly right." As Emma drifted off to sleep, Lily stood by the window, looking out at the forest. For just a moment, though she would never tell anyone, not even Jacob, she thought she saw two shapes at the edge of their garden, a large silhouette and a smaller one beside it, watching over the house where a special child slept. Whether it was real or imagined, it didn't matter. The connection remained, a silent thread binding together two worlds that had, for one miraculous moment, touched and changed each other forever. And somewhere in the ancient forest, beneath the sheltering branches of an oak tree, a mother bear and her growing cub slept peacefully, perhaps dreaming of a small human with gentle hands and a heart brave enough to bridge the divide between wilderness and civilization, a child who had forever changed what it meant to be wild and what it meant to be human. In years to come, long after Emma had grown and had children of her own, visitors to Pine Haven would sometimes report a strange sight: a woman walking alone at the forest's edge, and a bear watching from the trees, neither afraid nor aggressive, but acknowledging each other as old friends might do after a lifetime of shared secrets. And though few believed such stories, preferring to dismiss them as local legend, the people of Pine Haven would simply smile and say that some bonds, once formed, transcend the ordinary boundaries of time and species and language, that some connections once made are never truly broken. For in a world that too often separates and divides, the story of a child and a bear reminds us of what we can be at our best, beings capable of reaching across the deepest divides to touch each other with compassion and understanding, and in that touch, discovering that we are not so different after all. The end was chatting with the other villagers who had gathered for the annual spring festival, their laughter carrying across the clearing. "Emma, stay close, sweetie," Lily called, momentarily distracted by Mrs. Patterson's questions about her apple pie recipe. Emma babbled in response, her chubby legs carrying her a few steps closer to the water's edge where golden cattails swayed hypnotically. Unbeknownst to the villagers, a mother bear and her young cub had been drawn to the area by the sweet scent of honey from wild beehives nestled in the hollows of the old oak trees. The mother bear, a magnificent creature with thick brown fur that shimmered in the sunlight, moved cautiously through the underbrush. Her cub, only a few months old, stumbled playfully behind her, occasionally stopping to investigate interesting smells or chase butterflies. The mother bear had crossed this area many times before, but the human gathering had disrupted her usual path. Food had been scarce since waking from hibernation, and the promise of honey was too tempting to ignore. She guided her cub toward the bridge, planning to cross to the other side where the forest was quieter and the beehives more plentiful. As she stepped onto the bridge, her weight caused the old wood to groan. A few of the villagers turned at the sound but saw nothing unusual. The mother bear froze, her instincts on high alert. Behind her the cub whimpered softly, sensing its mother's tension. The bear took another cautious step forward, her powerful muscles tensed and ready to flee if necessary. Then disaster struck. A rotted plank gave way beneath her right front paw, and as she jerked back in surprise, her movement caused several more planks to split. The bear tumbled sideways, a frightened roar escaping her throat as she clawed desperately at the remaining boards. By some cruel twist of fate, her neck and front leg became entangled in the old support ropes that had frayed and loosened over the years. There she hung, halfway through the broken section of bridge, her massive body dangling precariously above the rushing water. The ropes groaned under her weight, the rough fibers cutting into her flesh as she struggled. The cub cried out in distress, pacing frantically at the bridge's entrance, too afraid to venture further. The bear's roar echoed across the valley, instantly silencing the festive chatter. Heads turned, expressions changing from confusion to horror as the villagers realized what was happening. "Bear! There's a bear on the bridge!" someone shouted. Panic erupted as parents grabbed their children, pulling them away from the riverbank. Some men reached for hunting rifles that weren't there. This was supposed to be a day of celebration, not danger. In the commotion, little Emma had crawled farther from her mother than anyone had noticed. Her attention caught by the crying cub, she tilted her head curiously. Unlike the adults, Emma felt no fear, only wonder at the fluffy creature that seemed so sad. With a determined gleam in her eyes, she pushed herself up on unsteady legs and tottered closer to the bridge, a picked wildflower still clutched in her tiny fist. The villagers' voices grew louder as they argued about what to do. Some wanted to help the bear, others insisted on shooting it for safety. The mother bear thrashed wildly, her desperate movements causing the ropes to tighten further. Blood began to seep into her fur where the coarse hemp cut into her skin. The cub's cries grew more frantic, piercing the hearts of even the most hardened villagers. Emma was now only yards away from the bridge, her innocent heart drawing her toward the distressed animals. The mother bear spotted her approaching and went still, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something that looked surprisingly like concern. The cub, seeing the tiny human, stopped its crying and stared in wonder at the strange creature approaching them. No one had noticed Emma's movement yet. Everyone was focused on the trapped bear and the danger she presented. But as the baby girl took another wobbly step toward the bridge, the cub let out a soft whimper that caught the attention of Sheriff Connor Adams. "My God," he breathed, spotting Emma. "There's a baby heading toward the bear." A collective gasp rose from the crowd as the heads turned to follow Connor's pointing finger. Lily's face drained of color as she spotted her daughter toddling dangerously close to the distressed animals. "Emma!" she screamed, lurching to her feet. Jacob spun around, his eyes widening in horror as he saw his baby girl just steps away from the wild animals. He broke into a sprint, but a sudden cracking sound from the bridge made everyone freeze. The mother bear's struggles had intensified at the sound of human voices. With each desperate movement, more of the old wooden planks splintered and gave way. Now she hung even more precariously, only the entangled ropes preventing her from plummeting into the churning waters 30 feet below. Her fur was matted with sweat and blood. Her breathing labored as she fought against the pain and terror of her situation. "Nobody move," ordered Connor, raising his hand. "Any sudden movements might spook her more. We need to think this through." Lily clutched Jacob's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "But Emma," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Our baby." Emma, oblivious to the danger and the adult's panic, had reached the edge of the bridge. The bear cub, now just a few feet away, had stopped crying and was watching the human child with curious eyes. Emma extended her hand, the crumpled wildflower still clutched in her tiny fingers, and made a series of soft cooing sounds. To everyone's astonishment, the cub responded with a gentle whimper and inched closer, its nose twitching as it caught the sweet scent of the flower. The mother bear, seeing her cub approach the human child, let out a low warning growl, but remained surprisingly still, as though weighing the situation with an almost human-like calculation. "I've never seen anything like it," whispered Hannah Davis, the village veterinarian, who had been spending the day with her sister's family when the commotion began. "That bear should be lashing out in panic, but she's watching her cub and the baby like she's waiting." Connor motioned for Jacob and Lily to stay put. "Hannah, what are our options here?" he asked quietly, his eyes never leaving Emma and the animals. Before Hannah could answer, a group of teenage boys pushed their way to the front of the crowd. Among them was Ryan Parker, known throughout the village for his troublemaking and cruel streak. "This is ridiculous," he sneered, picking up a stick from the ground. "It's just a stupid bear. We should scare it off before it hurts someone." Before anyone could stop him, he hurled the stick toward the trapped animal. It fell short but clattered loudly on the bridge planks. The mother bear roared in fear and anger, thrashing wildly against her bonds. The cub scampered backward, its brief moment of curiosity replaced by terror. Emma, startled by the sudden noise and movement, lost her balance and fell backward, landing on her bottom. Her face scrunched up, and she began to cry, the flower dropping from her hand. The sound of Emma's cries seemed to cut through the tension like a knife. The mother bear went suddenly still, her dark eyes fixing on the distressed human child with an expression that made several villagers exchange bewildered glances. There was something in that gaze, something that looked almost like understanding. "Ryan, get back here right now!" Connor grabbed the teenager's arm roughly. "You could have gotten that baby killed." But another problem was developing. The cub, agitated by its mother's distress and the tension in the air, had begun to pace back and forth along the edge of the bridge. With each step, it got closer to the broken section, and to the sheer drop to the river below. "If that cub falls, the mother will go berserk," Hannah warned, moving slowly toward Emma. "We need to get the baby away from there, and we need to stabilize that bridge somehow." Jacob and Lily were frozen in place, the instinct to rush to their child warring with the fear that any sudden movement would make the situation worse. The entire village watched in horrified silence as the scene played out before them. Then, something unexpected happened. Emma stopped crying and looked up at the mother bear. For a long moment, child and beast locked eyes. Then, with the simple determination that only a baby could possess, Emma pushed herself back to her feet, retrieved her dropped flower, and once again reached toward the cub. "Bah," she said clearly, extending the flower. "Bah." The cub hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. The mother bear made a soft grunting sound that seemed almost like encouragement. Slowly, the cub edged closer to Emma again, its nose twitching. From the crowd emerged an elderly figure, moving with slow but determined steps. It was Elijah Thompson, the oldest resident of Pine Haven at 93 years old. Despite his age, his eyes were sharp as he observed the scene before him. "I've lived alongside these woods my entire life," he said, his voice carrying surprising strength. "And I've never seen a bear act this way. There's something special happening here, something we shouldn't interfere with." But Ryan and his friends weren't impressed by the old man's words. "This is stupid," Ryan muttered, picking up another, larger stick. "That bear's going to attack any second." Hannah spotted his movement and stepped between him and the bridge. "Ryan, don't you dare," she warned. "You're making things worse." While the tension between the villagers escalated, no one noticed a new development on the bridge. The ropes suspending the mother bear had begun to unravel further, the aged fibers giving way one by one under her substantial weight. A low, creaking sound was the only warning before one of the main support ropes snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The mother bear dropped several feet before being jerked to a stop by the remaining ropes, now wrapped even more tightly around her neck and leg. She let out a strangled roar of pain and fear. The cub darted back from Emma, crying out for its mother. Emma's face crumpled again, but this time she didn't cry. Instead, she turned to look at the adults, her expression so serious and imploring that several people later swore they saw wisdom beyond her years in those innocent eyes. "Help," she said clearly, one of the few words she knew. "Help." The single word, spoken with such pure intention, seemed to break the spell of inaction that had gripped the villagers. Jacob approached slowly, crouching down to his daughter's level a few feet away. "Emma, sweetheart," he said softly. "You need to come to Daddy now. It's not safe." Emma looked at her father, then back at the cub, and finally up at the struggling mother bear. She took a step toward Jacob, then stopped, looking torn. The cub whimpered again, and Emma turned back to it. "Help," she repeated, pointing at the mother bear. Hannah moved forward carefully, her trained eye assessing the situation. "The bear's losing blood," she said quietly to Connor. "If we don't get her down soon, she might not survive, even if she doesn't fall." Connor ran a hand through his hair, weighing their limited options. "But how? We can't get close enough to cut her free without risking our lives." "Maybe we can," said a new voice. It was Michael Hayes, who worked as a construction foreman in the nearby town. "I have some equipment in my truck that might help, and if we create a distraction for the mother bear, a couple of us might be able to reinforce the bridge enough to approach her safely." As the adults debated the best course of action, Emma had made her own decision. While everyone's attention was momentarily diverted, she had taken another step toward the bear cub, still clutching her wildflower offering. This time, the cub moved forward too, its fear seemingly forgotten in the face of the child's gentle persistence. When Lily looked back, her heart nearly stopped. Her baby was now sitting on the ground at the very edge of the bridge, and the bear cub, a wild animal capable of seriously injuring an adult, let alone a toddler, was sniffing at her outstretched hand. "Emma," she gasped, but Jacob held her back. "Wait," he whispered, his grip firm but gentle. "Look." The cub had taken the wildflower from Emma's hand with surprising delicacy. Emma giggled softly, completely unafraid, and reached out to touch the cub's ear. The cub did not flinch away, but instead made a sound that was almost like a purr. Above them, the mother bear had gone still again, watching the interaction with what could only be described as astonishment. Despite her pain and precarious position, she made no aggressive moves, no threatening sounds. It was as if she understood that her cub was not in danger from this tiny human. "This is incredible," Hannah whispered. "I've worked with wildlife for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like this." The moment of wonder was shattered by a shout from the river below. "Hey, there's someone down here!" All eyes turned to the water, where a canoe was approaching rapidly, paddled by a man in outdoor gear. It was Nathan Reed, a wildlife photographer who often camped in the area to document the local fauna. "I saw what happened from downstream," he called up. "I might be able to help." Hope surged through the crowd. Perhaps with help from the water below and careful work from above, they could save the bear without anyone, human or animal, getting hurt. But the situation was growing more dire by the minute. The remaining ropes were visibly fraying, and the mother bear's struggles were growing weaker, a dangerous sign. Meanwhile, on the bridge, an extraordinary friendship was blooming. Emma had now placed her tiny hand directly on the cub's head, patting it gently as she might pet a dog. The cub had settled beside her, seemingly taking comfort in the child's presence as they both watched the efforts to save its mother. Michael returned with his equipment: ropes, a harness, and tools that might help secure the bridge and free the trapped bear. Nathan had beached his canoe and was climbing up the embankment, a tranquilizer gun in hand. "I always carry this for emergencies," he explained, showing the proper wildlife management tags that authorized him to use such equipment. A small dose might calm her enough to stop struggling while we work to free her. As the rescue plan came together, dark clouds began gathering overhead. The weather, which had been perfect all morning, was turning rapidly. The wind picked up, causing the damaged bridge to sway more noticeably. The first few raindrops fell, cold and heavy, promising a significant downpour. "We need to hurry," Connor urged, organizing the villagers into groups. "That storm's going to make everything more dangerous." Lily had edged closer to Emma and the cub, fighting every maternal instinct that screamed at her to snatch her baby away from the wild animal. But she could see what everyone else saw. There was a connection between the two young creatures that defied explanation. "Emma, honey," she said softly, crouching a few feet away. "The nice men are going to help the bear. Can you come to Mommy now?" Emma looked up at her mother, then at the cub, appearing conflicted. The cub, sensing her indecision, nuzzled against her hand. Then, to everyone's surprise, it took a few steps toward Lily, as if encouraging Emma to go to her mother. The rain was falling steadily now, making the wooden planks slippery and visibility poor. Nathan had positioned himself below with the tranquilizer gun, waiting for a clear shot that wouldn't risk sending the bear plunging into the water if she lost consciousness too quickly. Michael and Connor were carefully securing additional ropes to create a safety harness they could use to approach the trapped animal. Just as they were about to put their plan into action, a loud crack of thunder shook the air. Lightning flashed, momentarily blinding everyone. When their vision cleared, they were met with a horrifying sight. The sudden movement caused by the thunder had made the cub jump in fright, directly toward the broken section of the bridge. Time seemed to slow as the cub's back paws slipped off the edge. Its front claws scrabbled desperately at the wood, failing to find purchase on the rain-slick surface. The mother bear roared in terror, renewing her struggles with sudden, desperate strength. And then, before anyone could react, Emma lunged forward, her small hands grasping the cub's fur. For one heart-stopping moment, it looked as though both baby and cub would tumble into the raging waters below. Lily screamed. Jacob lunged forward, and the entire village held its breath. But Emma, operating on pure instinct, had braced her feet against a still solid plank and was pulling with all her tiny might. The cub, responding to her touch, was fighting to climb back up, its claws finally finding enough grip to haul itself back onto the bridge. As the cub scrambled to safety, the force of its movement sent Emma tumbling backward. She rolled once, twice, coming terrifyingly close to the edge herself before Jacob managed to reach her, scooping her into his arms and retreating to safer ground. The mother bear had witnessed the entire exchange. Her struggles ceased abruptly as she stared at the human child who had just saved her cub. There was something in her gaze that touched everyone who saw it. A look of such profound understanding that it seemed to transcend the barriers between species. The rain poured down, soaking everyone to the skin. The wind howled through the trees. But in that moment, a strange calm seemed to settle over the bridge and the gathered villagers. Something had shifted. A connection had been made that none of them could quite explain. Nathan seized the opportunity provided by the bear's momentary stillness. With expert precision, he fired the tranquilizer dart, hitting the bear in her flank. She flinched, but didn't resume struggling. Within minutes, her movements became slower, though she remained conscious, her eyes fixed on her cub and the humans surrounding it. "Now's our chance," Michael said, securing the last of his safety ropes. "Connor, Hannah, are you with me?" The three of them moved carefully onto what remained of the bridge, approaching the suspended bear with extreme caution. The cub watched them nervously but made no aggressive moves, seemingly understanding that they were trying to help. Emma, safe in her father's arms, pointed at the bear and repeated, "Help, help, bear." "We're trying, sweetheart," Jacob whispered, holding her close. "We're trying." The rescue operation was painstaking and dangerous. The tranquilizer had calmed the bear but not rendered her unconscious, a careful calculation on Nathan's part to ensure she retained enough muscle control to avoid drowning if she fell into the water. Michael, Connor, and Hannah worked methodically to secure additional support ropes around the bear's body while carefully cutting away the entangled ropes that were causing her injury. The villagers formed a human chain, passing tools and supplies as needed. Even Ryan and his friends, chastened by the near tragedy their recklessness had almost caused, joined in the effort, holding tarps overhead to provide some shelter from the driving rain. Throughout it all, the cub remained near Emma and her parents, occasionally glancing back at its mother as if seeking reassurance. Emma, though held securely by Jacob, kept reaching toward the cub, making soft, comforting sounds that seemed to calm the young animal. "I think we've almost got it," Michael called out after nearly 45 minutes of careful work. "The last rope is about to give. Everyone be ready." Hannah had prepared a soft landing area on the riverbank directly below, padding it with branches, leaves, and the villagers' picnic blankets. Nathan stood by in his canoe, ready to help if the bear fell into the water instead. With a final snap, the rope gave way. The mother bear dropped the remaining few feet to the makeshift cushion below, landing with a heavy thud that knocked the breath from her lungs but appeared to cause no additional injury. The cub immediately ran to the edge of the bridge, crying out for its mother. "We need to get the cub down to her," Hannah said, already moving toward the frightened young animal. But Emma was squirming in Jacob's arms, pointing insistently. "Down," she demanded. "Down!" "Emma, no, it's not safe," Lily protested, though her voice lacked conviction. They had all witnessed something extraordinary today, something that challenged everything they thought they knew about wild animals and human children. Elijah Thompson stepped forward, his wise old eyes twinkling despite the rain plastering his white hair to his forehead. "Let the child finish what she started," he said softly. "Some things are beyond our understanding, but that doesn't make them any less real." After exchanging a long look with her husband, Lily nodded. Jacob carefully set Emma down but kept his hands hovering just inches from her, ready to snatch her up at the first sign of danger. Emma immediately toddled toward the cub, who waited for her with surprising patience. The entire village watched in amazed silence as Emma reached out her hand to the cub. After a moment's hesitation, the cub placed its paw in her tiny palm, an action so deliberate it left no doubt about its intentions. Together, the human child and bear cub walked slowly toward Hannah, who would help them both safely descend to where the mother bear lay recovering. As Hannah guided them down the embankment using a safer path away from the damaged bridge, the rain suddenly stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the scene below. The mother bear had managed to sit up, though she was clearly exhausted and in pain. When she saw her cub approaching with the human child, she made a soft, grunting sound that contained no hint of threat. What happened next would be retold in Pinehaven for generations to come. Emma, still holding the cub's paw, led it directly to its mother. The mother bear sniffed her cub carefully, assuring herself it was unharmed. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, she turned her attention to Emma. Slowly, with deliberate gentleness, she extended her massive head toward the tiny human. Parents gasped. Villagers reached for weapons that weren't there. Hannah raised a hand, signaling everyone to remain still. Emma, showing no fear whatsoever, reached out and placed her small hand on the bear's nose. The mother bear closed her eyes briefly, as if savoring the touch. Then she lowered her head in what could only be described as a boo before lying back down, clearly allowing Hannah to approach and tend to her wounds. I've never... Hannah's voice broke with emotion. I've never seen anything like this in my life. Tears streamed down Lily's face as Jacob wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Around them, hardened villagers who had initially wanted to shoot the bear were openly weeping at the display of cross-species compassion they had just witnessed. She knows, Elijah said, his own eyes wet with tears. That bear knows her cub would have fallen if not for Emma. She's thanking her. Nathan, who had been documenting the entire incident with his camera whenever he could, shook his head in wonder. I've studied wildlife for 20 years, he said quietly. I've never seen this level of cognition, this kind of emotional intelligence in a wild bear. This is revolutionary. Hannah had begun cleaning and treating the bear's wounds, working carefully but efficiently. The tranquilizer would wear off soon, and they needed to complete as much care as possible before then. To everyone's continued amazement, the mother bear remained calm throughout the treatment, her eyes rarely leaving Emma and her cub, who sat together nearby, the cub occasionally nuzzling the child's hand. What happens now? Someone asked. The bear can barely walk, and we can't just leave them here. My cabin's not far, Nathan offered. It's equipped for wildlife rehabilitation. I could monitor her there until she's well enough to return to the wild. And I'll help, Hannah added immediately. Between the two of us, we can give her the care she needs. As plans were made for the bear's temporary care, Emma had grown tired from the excitement. She yawned widely, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. The bear cub, noticing her fatigue, curled up against her side, creating a picture so heartwarming that several villagers pulled out phones to capture the moment. We should get Emma home, Jacob said softly to Lily. It's been quite a day for her. Lily nodded, but as Jacob moved to pick Emma up, the cub made a soft whimpering sound and pressed closer to the child. Emma, half asleep already, patted the cub's head. "Friend," she murmured, using another of her limited vocabulary words. "My friend." The mother bear watched this exchange with what could only be described as maternal indulgence. Despite her injuries and the ordeal she had endured, there was a peaceful acceptance in her demeanor that was utterly at odds with everything the villagers thought they knew about wild bears. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the riverbank, the villagers worked together to create a makeshift stretcher to transport the injured bear to Nathan's cabin. The cub, after much coaxing and with frequent glances back at Emma, finally agreed to follow its mother. Before they left, though, something extraordinary happened one final time. The mother bear, mustering her remaining strength, raised herself slightly and extended a paw toward Emma, who was now drowsily resting in her father's arms. Jacob, following an instinct he couldn't explain, brought his daughter close enough that the bear's paw gently touched the child's cheek. A collective sob rose from the watching villagers. There wasn't a dry eye to be found as they witnessed this final exchange between two mothers from different worlds, one expressing gratitude for the safety of her child, the other accepting the thanks with the simple openness that only a child could offer. As Nathan and his volunteers carefully lifted the stretcher to begin the journey to his cabin, Ryan Parker stepped forward, his earlier bravado completely gone. Tears streaked his face as he approached Connor. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I could have gotten everyone killed because I was being stupid. I want to help take care of the bears. Please." Connor studied the teenager for a long moment, then nodded. "I think that's a good idea, Ryan. We all have something to learn from what happened here today." As the procession moved slowly away into the forest, Emma fell asleep in Jacob's arms, a small smile on her face. Lily walked beside them, her heart full of a complex mixture of terror at what might have happened and wonder at what had occurred instead. "Our daughter did something remarkable today," Jacob whispered, careful not to wake Emma. "Something I don't think any of us will ever forget." Lily nodded, gazing at her sleeping child with new eyes. "She showed us something we all needed to see," she replied softly. "That sometimes the purest heart sees what the rest of us miss." The damaged bridge stood silhouetted against the evening sky, a reminder of how quickly life could change, how disaster could turn to miracle in the blink of an eye. Tomorrow, the villagers would begin repairs, making it stronger than before. But for tonight, they returned to their homes with hearts and minds forever changed by the extraordinary connection they had witnessed between a human child and a wild bear family, a connection that had brought tears to the eyes of everyone present and would live on in the stories they would tell for years to come. Dawn broke clear and crisp the following morning. The storm had passed, leaving behind a freshly washed world that sparkled in the early sunlight. Jacob stood on the porch of their small cottage at the edge of the village, sipping coffee and watching as Lily carefully checked Emma for any injuries they might have missed in the chaos of the previous day. The toddler seemed completely unaffected by her adventure, babbling happily and playing with her wooden blocks as if saving wild animals was an everyday occurrence. "I still can't believe what happened," Lily murmured, running her fingers through Emma's soft curls. "When I think about how close we came to losing her—" Jacob set down his mug and knelt beside them. "But we didn't," he said softly, "and I can't help thinking that something special happened out there, something bigger than all of us." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Jacob opened it to find Connor Adams standing on their doorstep, his expression troubled. "Morning, Jacob, Lily," he greeted them, tipping his hat. "Sorry to disturb you so early, but I thought you should know. There's been some developments with the bears." Lily immediately pulled Emma closer, maternal instinct flaring. "What kind of developments?" Connor stepped inside, accepting the cup of coffee Lily offered. "Nathan called from his cabin about an hour ago. The mother bear's injuries are worse than Hannah initially thought. The ropes cut deep into her neck and shoulder, and there's infection setting in. Hannah's doing everything she can, but—" He trailed off, his expression grim. "She's not going to make it?" Jacob asked quietly, glancing at Emma, who was happily oblivious to the adult conversation. "It's touch and go," Connor replied. "But that's not all. Word's gotten out about what happened yesterday. There's a news crew from the city setting up by the bridge already, and I've had calls from wildlife officials, researchers, even some government types asking questions. This is turning into something big." Lily exchanged a worried look with Jacob. Their peaceful village life suddenly seemed in danger of being upended. "What do they want?" "Information, mostly, for now." But Nathan's concerned about the attention. If too many people find out exactly where he's keeping the bears, they might not get the peace and quiet they need to recover. Connor hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "And there's something else. Ryan Parker's father is causing trouble. Says the bear is dangerous and should be put down, not treated like some kind of celebrity." Jacob's jaw tightened. "After what his son did? If it weren't for Ryan throwing that stick—" "I know," Connor said, raising a placating hand. "Believe me, I know. But George Parker has influence in this town, and he's rallying some of the other old-timers who've always seen bears as nothing but pests and predators. Emma looked up at the mention of bears, her eyes brightening. "Bear friend," she said clearly, pointing toward the forest. The adults exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Lily spoke. "What can we do to help?" Before Connor could answer, there was another knock at the door, more insistent this time. Jacob opened it to find Hannah standing there, looking exhausted but determined. Behind her was Nathan, cradling a small, furry bundle in his arms. "The cub won't eat," Hannah said without preamble. "It's been crying for its mother, but even when we take it to her, it just whimpers and looks toward the village." Nathan had a theory. Emma had spotted the cub and was already squirming out of Lily's grasp, her arms outstretched toward the small bear. "Friend!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with delight. The cub immediately perked up at the sound of Emma's voice, its nose twitching as it tried to locate her. Nathan carefully set it down on the cottage floor, where it promptly scampered toward Emma with a happy little grunt. "This is highly unusual behavior," Hannah explained, her scientific mind clearly struggling to reconcile what she was witnessing. "But after yesterday we thought, well, we hoped that Emma might be able to help," Nathan finished for her, watching as the cub gently nuzzled the toddler's hand. "The mother bear is too weak to properly care for the cub right now, and it won't accept food from us. If the cub doesn't eat soon, we might lose them both." Lily's maternal instincts were immediately in conflict. Part of her wanted to snatch Emma away from the wild animal, while another part recognized the extraordinary bond that had formed between them. Jacob placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "What exactly are you asking?" he questioned, his voice carefully neutral. Hannah and Nathan exchanged glances. "We need your help, Emma's help, to save these bears," Hannah said finally. "I know it's a lot to ask, but after what we all witnessed yesterday." Emma had settled on the floor, the bear cub curled up beside her as if they had been companions for years rather than mere acquaintances. She stroked its fur gently, murmuring in the half-formed language of toddlers. The cub's eyes were half-closed in contentment, its earlier distress apparently forgotten. "Will it be dangerous?" Lily asked, watching the pair with a mixture of amazement and concern. "For Emma, I mean." Nathan shook his head. "We'll be there the entire time, and we'd keep them supervised every second. But based on what we've seen, I don't believe this cub would ever hurt her. It's as if it knows she saved its life." Connor, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "I'll be there too, and I can post a deputy to make sure no reporters or troublemakers get near Nathan's cabin." Jacob and Lily had a silent conversation with their eyes, the kind that only parents can have, weighing risks and benefits, fears and hopes. Finally, Jacob nodded slowly. "We'll help," he said. "But we stay with Emma every moment, and at the first sign of any danger, we're out of there." Relief washed over Hannah's face. "Thank you. This could mean the difference between life and death for the mother bear." As they prepared to leave, gathering supplies and warm clothes for the trek to Nathan's cabin, a commotion outside drew their attention. Raised voices and the sound of approaching vehicles broke the morning quiet. Connor moved to the window, peering out cautiously. "Damn," he muttered. "It's George Parker, and he's brought half the town council with him. And is that a news van?" Nathan immediately scooped up the bear cub, which squirmed in protest at being separated from Emma. "We need to leave now, through the back. If they see the cub here—" Jacob nodded grimly. "Go, take the path behind the garden. It connects to the forest trail. We'll deal with Parker and catch up with you." Hannah hesitated. Are you sure? Go, Lily insisted, picking up Emma, who was reaching for the cub with a distressed expression. We'll be right behind you. As Hannah and Nathan slipped out the back door with the cub, Connor, Jacob, and Lily braced themselves to face the approaching crowd. Emma began to cry, sensitive to the tension and upset at being separated from her new friend. It's okay, sweetie, Lily soothed, though her own heart was racing. We'll see your friend again soon. The front door burst open without a knock. George Parker stood there, a barrel-chested man with a florid face and an air of self-importance. Behind him were 3 members of the town council, and hovering at the edge of the porch was a woman with a microphone and a cameraman trying to get a good angle. Where is it? Parker demanded without preamble. My boy Ryan says they brought that dangerous animal here. Connor stepped forward, his official demeanor firmly in place. George, you're trespassing on private property. I suggest you lower your voice and state your business properly. Parker's face darkened further. My business is protecting this town from wild animals and bleeding hearts who've forgotten that bears are killers, not pets. That creature should be put down before it mauls someone, and you know it, Connor. One of the council members, Margaret Winters, placed a restraining hand on Parker's arm. George, please, let's handle this civilly. She turned to Jacob and Lily. We've heard some concerning reports about the incident at the bridge yesterday and about the bears being kept somewhere in the village. As council members, we have a responsibility to ensure public safety. Jacob adjusted his stance slightly, moving to block any view of the back door. The bears are being cared for by licensed wildlife professionals, he said calmly, and they're not in the village. Nathan Reed has a proper rehabilitation facility in the forest. The reporter pushed forward, thrusting her microphone toward them. Sarah Chen, Channel 12 News. Is it true that your baby established some kind of supernatural connection with these wild bears? Witnesses are calling it a miracle. Lily bristled at the intrusive question, holding Emma closer. My daughter is not a sideshow attraction, Miss Chen, and there was nothing supernatural about yesterday's events, just a child's innocence meeting an animal's intelligence. So, you deny that your daughter communicated with the bears? Chen pressed, the cameraman edging closer. Connor moved to block the camera. That's enough. This is private property, and you don't have permission to film here. All of you need to leave now, or I'll have no choice but to... His words were cut off by a new disturbance. Shouts from the direction of the village center. A young deputy came running up the path, out of breath and wide-eyed. Sheriff, there's big trouble at the bridge. Some wildlife officers showed up with capture equipment, saying they have orders to take custody of the injured bears, but they're being blocked by a bunch of villagers who have formed a human chain across the road. Parker looked triumphant. Good. About time someone with authority stepped in. Connor's expression hardened. Those bears are under the care of a licensed wildlife rehabilitators. No one has the authority to just take them. Tell that to the Department of Wildlife Management, the deputy replied anxiously. They've got paperwork, Sheriff, official-looking stuff. Jacob glanced at Lily, concern etched on his features. They both knew what this meant. Hannah and Nathan would be heading into a potentially volatile situation with the bear cub. We need to warn them, Lily whispered. Emma, who had been quiet during the confrontation, suddenly spoke up clearly. Help Bear Mama, she said, pointing insistently toward the forest. Help! Her simple words cut through the tension, momentarily silencing everyone. Sarah Chen's expression softened as she looked at the earnest toddler. Maybe there is a story here, she murmured, but not the one I was sent to cover. Before anyone could respond, the sound of a helicopter broke the morning stillness, growing louder as it approached the village. All heads turned skyward as a sleek black helicopter appeared over the treetops, circling once before heading toward the damaged bridge. "What now?" Jacob muttered, a sense of foreboding washing over him. The answer came in the form of 3 black SUVs that rounded the bend in the road, moving at speed toward the center of Pinehaven. They passed the cottage without stopping, kicking up dust in their wake. "Government," Connor said grimly, recognizing the vehicles. "But which agency?" "Does it matter?" Parker snapped. "Finally, someone's taking this seriously." Margaret Winters, who until now had been a voice of relative reason, looked troubled. "This is getting out of hand. A wild bear and her cub shouldn't be causing this much commotion." "It's not just about the bears anymore," Lily said quietly, bouncing Emma, who was growing increasingly agitated. "It's about what happened between them and Emma. People want to believe in something magical, or they want to prove it wasn't." The deputy's radio crackled to life, a voice calling urgently for Connor. He stepped aside to take the call, his expression growing more concerned by the second. When he returned, his face was grim. "We need to move now," he said to Jacob and Lily. "That was Elijah. The wildlife officers are being pushed back by the villagers, but those government types are taking a different approach. They're heading for Nathan's cabin. Someone must have told them where it is." "Ryan," Parker said suddenly, his bluster fading as understanding dawned. "My boy went out early this morning, said he was going to make things right." Connor fixed him with a hard stare. "If your son has put those bears in danger after everything that happened yesterday—" "I'm coming with you," Parker interrupted, his face ashen. "Ryan's with them. I need to make sure he's safe." The reporter, Sarah Chen, stepped forward. "I'm coming too. The public deserves to know what's really happening here, not some sensationalized version my producers want." Connor looked like he wanted to object but recognized the futility. "Fine, but you follow my lead, and that camera stays off until I say otherwise." He turned to Jacob and Lily. "You two should stay here with Emma. This could get ugly." But Emma was already squirming in Lily's arms, pointing insistently toward the forest, her face scrunched with determination. "Bear Mama hurt. Help Bear." Jacob met Lily's eyes. They both knew their strong-willed daughter well enough to recognize that keeping her away from the unfolding situation would only cause her distress. And after what they'd witnessed yesterday, could they really dismiss the connection she seemed to have formed? "We're coming too," Jacob decided. "Emma's already involved, whether we like it or not, and if there's any chance she can help calm the situation." Connor hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Stay close to me, and be prepared to leave immediately if I say so." The strange procession set off toward Nathan's cabin, Connor leading, followed by Jacob carrying Emma, Lily, George Parker, the council members who refused to be left behind, and finally Sarah Chen and her cameraman, who despite instructions was filming discreetly. They took the forest path, moving as quickly as they could while still being careful on the uneven terrain. The sounds of the helicopter grew fainter as it circled elsewhere, but the distant shouts from the village suggested the confrontation at the bridge was still ongoing. "What exactly do these government people want?" Lily asked as they walked, keeping her voice low. Connor shook his head. "Not clear. Their vehicles had Department of Scientific Research markings, but that could mean anything. Best guess? They've heard about what happened and want to study the bears, and possibly Emma." Jacob's grip on his daughter tightened protectively. "That's not happening." "Agreed," Connor said firmly. "But we need to be smart about this. These folks likely have authority we can't easily challenge." They were nearing Nathan's cabin when they heard voices ahead, urgent, argumentative. Connor signaled for everyone to stop and stay quiet, then crept forward to assess the situation. He returned moments later, his expression troubled. 4 agents in suits are trying to enter the cabin. Nathan's blocking the door, and Hannah's inside with the bears. Ryan's there too, trying to explain something to the agents, but they're not listening. And there's someone else, an older woman in a lab coat who seems to be in charge. "What do we do?" Jacob asked, feeling Emma grow tense in his arms. Connor considered for a moment. "We need to de-escalate. These people have authority, but they also need cooperation. If we all show up, it might make things worse." He turned to George Parker. "George, your son needs you. You should go first, get him away from there." For once, Parker didn't argue. Nodding grimly, he moved ahead toward the cabin. "Ms. Chen," Connor continued, "I'm guessing you have press credentials? That might actually be useful right now. Government types tend to be more careful when media is present."